going now, just so we can document everything from the point that we pull up. I'm sorry? This lady, she's CPS.
But for now, the child welfare, we're taking over for the night. And when we go to court tomorrow, all your concerns will be addressed. If I'm wrong, your child will be returned to you immediately. But for safety reasons, you have to be monitored coming to our house. Okay? You have to come. You have nothing to be afraid of. Come over with me.
Like, why you guys...
He's afraid of you.
You're afraid of me? You have nothing to be afraid of. The police is here, but you have to go. This is the law, okay? I might bring you back tonight if you want, but I need to talk to you separately from your parents.
Then go over there and talk to him separately.
I need to take you to a safe place, separate from your home.
You got 3 cops here. You got 3 cops here. Isn't it safe here? We already established that there was no abuse.
There is abuse going on. This child is afraid of you, and I can sense all that.
Stop going back and forth. Can you call your supervisor real quick?
He's talking about take him where?
Like just to like their offices until they find like a place to put him for the night, like some home or something. I don't know how they do it.
So are you leaving with me? You're not leaving with me. All right, that's fine. That's fine.
It's all right, baby.
My name is Amos Jones, and I'm a Washington, D.C. civil rights and religious liberty attorney, and I represent families and others who've been victimized by state actors who abrogate people's rights. I have the privilege and a solemn responsibility to a family of clients known publicly as John Doe II and Mrs. John Doe II, an upstanding mid-40s pair of parents in a traditional family with 3 sons, homeschooled, who are well ahead of grade level. This is a wonderful small business owning family, Prince George's County, Maryland. I represent this family who came to me after having been falsely accused of child abuse by authorities in Maryland, as well as in the District of Columbia at a children's hospital.
Because we require protection over surroundings, okay? And the order says it's required that the child is in serious danger and that emergency situation exists.
Like, we actually spoke to another worker that was with her, and she disagrees with what she's doing.
But she went and got it. She went and got it order.
But the worker that we were working with, the worker we were working with said this
he has to go and now for safety reasons.
A neighbor had reported that they thought that the child might be having some same-sex attraction, and that we believe it was a neighbor at first, before Child Protective Services showed up in June of 2021 the first time.
So are you leaving with me? You're not leaving with me. All right, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
So the John Doe family, regular American family, veterans, African Americans. They're not conservative people, they're just regular people. From what I've been told and what I've seen, their child is autistic presenting.
The son suffers from autism spectrum disorder and was in the process of being tested for confirmation of that early diagnosis when all of this started happening in 2021, this being the claims that the parents were non-affirming in some way. Mr. John Doe II and Mrs. John Doe II had some indication that there was some confusion in terms of what may be called sexual orientation with regard to their child after it was revealed that the child had been in chat rooms and there had been older men in Europe who had been trying to lure the son into relations and changes and things. And fortunately, it's through those chats that the parents learned that their son had declared, "But I don't want to be a woman." The child indicated to the parents he was fearful of growing into a black man because he had absorbed all of the media material from the George Floyd long hot summer of 2020 and simply feared being shot, as autistic kids tend to overreact to stimuli. but there was no intention of becoming a woman or LGBT. In fact, this young man had just fallen madly in love with the girl at his track team who moved away, and he was distraught about that. And that's when the parents had him in counseling at Easter Seals.
And he was disappointed, and he began to cut himself. And so the parents, being any normal parents, took the child, to Children's National. And from there, things went insane.
The parents took the child immediately to Washington Children's National Hospital, which was thought to be a place of great care and high standards for children in distress. That's when all of this started to fall apart.
So what we have begun to see happening in hospitals, particularly with mental health institutions or hospitals that are dealing with people having acute mental health issues, is that a parent will take their child having some sort of mental health issue. It might be a suicidal gesture, it could be some other meltdown. And they will take their child to the hospital. Within the hospital now, the parent is separated from the child, obviously, because now they're placed into the hospital population. And then the child will begin to express an alternative or discordant gender identity, a sexual identity that is different from their biological sex. And we are seeing across the board, or almost across the board, that these facilities are endorsing that identity.
I believe that it makes sense that if a youth going through this identity development receives appropriate and positive support and feedback, that will push them further along appropriate development. If they receive negative feedback or negative experiences, it may inhibit or deter their experience and their identity.
And in some cases, when the parent becomes involved and then the parent is not in agreement with that, if you have a parent that wants to hold on to biological reality for their child, then now you have a situation where the hospital is potentially becoming adverse to the parents and calling Child Protective Services on parents because the parent is not agreeing to endorse this identity.
In Prince George's County, Maryland, where the family owned a home and operated their business, the laws and regulations on affirmation of children, it turns out, have been expanded to demand that Child Protective Services employees and others operate on a presumption of non-confusion and certainty on the part of the child who might be indicating some questioning of any kind.
Avoid words like choice, preference, phase, or any other words that would make them feel like their feelings were less valid or that something was wrong with them.
And there's a rush to judgment and a rush to what we call, and what Mr. Doe informed me when they came to me in May of 2022, seeking constitutional help and parental rights intervention, a conversion therapy being worked by the state.
What we have found is that many children come into foster care because their families are unable and unwilling to accept who they are.
And there's a $10 million grant we've found out about in the last 2.5 years since we've been fighting for this family to reunite. $10 million grant from the federal government in a test market, Prince George's County, to try to figure out how to get these families who believe in the Bible and believe in traditional religious values to get these kids and convert them and to take them away from the parents and I suppose make examples out of them.
And so we've had a couple different sites there. It happened in Prince George's County, Maryland during the foster care implementation rollout that Shelley mentioned earlier, with both foster parents and grandparents and kinship parents involved while their young people were also in Affirm Youth. What is an affirmative stance, right? So what are we talking about, this Affirm caregiver? It is much more than the absence of homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. It's really about engaging with others in an affirmative way that includes sort of deprogramming anti-LGBTQ beliefs that are rooted in stigma, bias, and prejudice.
You can't abuse a child, that's illegal. We have definite restrictions on what you can do. You don't have full right over your child, God forbid. But there's certain, rights that give the parents when it comes to, healthcare, food, well-being, the things we expect, parents should be involved with. And transitioning is something I believe that parents should be involved in, especially when it's a minor. Children's National, on their website, they link autism with gender. And they mention they actually have cases as young as 3 years old. 3 years old? What 3-year-old child knows what when I was 3, I thought I was Batman.
Gender variance is seen in children as early as before 3 years old. This is appropriate developmental time for children to learn their gender roles and expectations and how these roles relate to themselves.
As a therapist, we want to challenge your reality because that's what helps you gain insight into who you are and into your environment. And when you gain insight into who you are and insight into your environment, you become closer and closer to be self-actualized. And when we are self-actualized, we're very well adjusted. We're able to have thicker skin, which is really important, especially in this world today, a culture where we base everything on feelings and thoughts to be our truth. And they're not, they're just feelings and thoughts. And that's how we test our reality, is being able to understand if these are feelings or just a thought, then it might not be true. So let's evaluate this. Let's take a deeper dive into what's going on. And having your family around gives you that safe space to be able to process that. When somebody makes a phone call, they will call the Department of Family and Protective Services, and then an investigation would start. And after the investigation, they make a determination whether or not the children need to be removed and placed in sub-care. Once they're placed in sub-care, they are technically a ward of the state. But the goal should always be, first and foremost, to give this resources to the family and help the family get back on their feet and the children to go home. That should always be the first priority for the children, is to get them home to a healthy family. And it doesn't have to be a perfect family, because that doesn't exist.
People who work in foster care need to learn about gender identity, sexuality, all of that. It's life or death. They always feel like, we have to hurry up and house these kids so they don't end up homeless. It doesn't matter if they have somewhere to stay if that person isn't going to be affirming of their identity. You put this queer foster kid in this situation where they have to choose between safety and validation, which are both safety issues.
As the parents were undergoing the stress of scrutiny and charges in Child Protective Services court and allegations from the hospital, and had their own family law attorneys over in Maryland, it became clear to them early on, in the middle of all of this that had begun in 2021, that they needed civil rights and constitutional counsel.
And I'm just paraphrasing here. They were told the child was now a girl. And they did every single thing to impede the family from seeing the child.
Suddenly there was a girl's name being used, and Mr. and Mrs. John Doe II thought that the child had been mixed up with a different child. This was all completely gobsmacking, and they have not seen their child to this day, more than 3 years later, other than in the clinical child protective services setting and in the clinical settings at doctor's visits at times over those years, where the foster mother was ordered to allow the parents to be at least around because their medical insurance was covering everything happening with their son.
I've listened to tapes because thank God they were of sound mind to start recording conversations. They were told to, again, paraphrasing, to change their religion. They're Christians. They try to bully the parents. They try to battle the parents to say, well, if you change your religion, we can give you a child. Your religion is harming the child.
You are much too young to know what you're feeling. Don't tell anyone else, honey. Let's keep this between you and me. And I'll say a prayer that you stop feeling this way, okay?
Mrs. Ling thinks that this is a phase and is worried about what this means for Samantha's religious faith. But Samantha feels like her feelings must be wrong if she isn't allowed to tell anyone else about them. She feels sad and confused.
And this is a boy who was raised in a Christian household. change, don't read this passage of the Bible. As a human being, this is wrong. As a parent, this is wrong. Their crime, according to Children's National, is saying, no, we don't consent to our child being transitioned. That is the only crime.
And one of the things when you have children that are misidentified, it's critical that you involve the entire family unit. Going back to, there's no love like the love of a parent. They don't know how to support. They don't want their children to necessarily feel rejected, but they also don't want their children to go down this path that is just paved with lots of pebbles that are going to make them trip and fall. They want their children to know that they're loved. They want their children to find a healthy path, and they want their children to be able to find a future that's not going to cause them to look back and be plagued with guilt or regret or remorse. And so parents are really going to have their best interest at heart.
I've been beating this drum that homophobia and transphobia is child abuse, and we need to recognize it as such. And I think providers really need to take that on and give face and value to the detriments of homophobia and transphobia of family rejection. It's so vital that we take a stand, that we make our court systems, that we push our systems to identify this as such.
An ally is someone who confronts, and in the context of LGBTQ patients and working with LGBTQ youth, confronting heterosexism, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia.
In Prince George's County, Maryland, absence of affirmation clearly, functionally, now counts as abuse. The state chose to place the child with a single woman in an apartment in Suitland. And this woman, we learned, had an assault charge in 2005. This woman, over the course of this foster parenting, oversaw a suicide attempt that landed John Doe III back in Children's National Hospital. So the child is removed from this home and put into basically what we believe is sociological shock treatment. Single woman with problems. The single foster mother pulled the child out of the autism therapy / diagnosis process so that could be obstructed as well.
Part of what is so unjust about this is that most often these young people, almost exclusively, almost pretty much always, they have very significant comorbidities, other mental health problems that are happening at the same time. The focus becomes entirely on the gender identity. It's as if there's the belief or the assumption that that's the cure-all pill. It is simply, if you affirm this identity, that's the cure to all of their mental health struggles. And so therefore everything else becomes ignored, and there's no treatment of the other underlying causes for their distress with their body.
After Mr. and Mrs. John Doe II reported these transgressions, including sexually transmitted disease tests going on, wow, they saw their son on Instagram cross-dressed, presenting as basically a prostitute. Might as well have been, it was horrible. And then mysteriously, the single foster mother living in the apartment dropped dead, and we don't know why or how.
They have so many relationships that are severed and abruptly severed. They don't know where they're going. They don't know who they're going to be with. And how scary when you're a child and you have zero control over your life or your home environment or anything that's going on, and you're just uprooted and the relationships are severed over and over and over again with strangers.
In Child Protective Services Court, the child declared, well, I will be fine with the friend of the deceased foster mother, all that trauma. And the friend turns out to be the hospital chaplain, we allege in court, where to this day, to the best of our knowledge, the son of this family is living.
It just sounds wonky, The whole thing stinks. The parents spent about 2 years fighting this in court because children tried to defame them, saying they were mentally abusing the child. but they had almost gone bankrupt. They had to sell, they had to move, because they couldn't. They spent 2 years paying lawyers to defend them from Children's National, and they still haven't seen their son.
Parents go through a major legal battle, and I've seen this with other reasons that children might be removed, and you're talking $150,000 plus or minus to get your kids back. So if you don't have the financial resources, you're really at a disadvantage. And so across the country, I've seen where kids are taken away based on this confused identity, and the parents fight tooth and nail to get their kids back, and it ends tragically for every single one of them. They age out, and then the parents are not able to regain that relationship with their children. And so it's lost until hopefully there's an intervention at some point where the children are able to reconnect with their biological family.
In the aftermath, there are still legal proceedings in order to recover the child, to heal from the damage. Mr. and Mrs. John Doe II have their own emotional pain and trauma. This amounts to lawfare. Most over-resourced parties, and the government has infinite resources, hospitals have infinite resources, know that they can attempt to run out the money on the plaintiff side or the victim side by simply drawing it out.
I'm aware of one particular grant in the amount of $1 million that was awarded by the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Program, and it was awarded to the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. So this is the National Association of Judges that are over juvenile courts and family courts. They received a $1 million grant in order to basically reform or remake the juvenile and family court system to be more safe for LGBTQ. And of course, we always want kids to be safe, but what that's actually doing is requiring affirmation of a discordant gender identity. Now, when you're training judges in this way, and then parents have to go in front of those judges, how are parents who want to hold on to biological reality for their child going to get justice? This is distorting our judicial system ideologically. It's introducing an ideological prejudice and bias into the system.
We wake up at night concerned, lawyer and client, about all the families to whom this is happening. This orchestrated, well-financed, forced snatching and sex changing of minor boys and girls, and we allege trafficking of them into this system, into medical experimentation that's extremely risky and unproven.
So the proponents of this approach would claim that, well, we're just affirming this child. It's this young person, female, who wants to be considered a boy, and that's how this person feels, and we're just supporting. That's the term. We're just supporting what this young person wants. We're just being supportive.
What I've learned in my role as a pediatrician for the last 15 years, and as a pediatrician who specializes in the care of transgender and gender diverse kids, is that these kids don't need me to figure them out. They need me to listen, to really listen, and to help them amplify the voice that's inside them. They don't actually need me to diagnose them.
We found her a counselor, and so through the help of that counselor, we then understood that we needed to let Rio be our guide.
I think about our trans folks who are young, and think about if they were exposed to having autonomy over their body and understanding and being able to understand that this is their body and that they were born for themselves, and if they need and whatever they need to do to be autonomous for themselves is what they need to do to be autonomous, instead of shaming into the binary, as I call it.
The problem with that is that is an abrogation of adult responsibility. In what other circumstance, when a child is desiring something that adults know from experience is ultimately going to be harmful or lead to regret, in what other realm do we say, oh, just go ahead, we'll support you in this? If a 15-year-old wants to start having a sexual relationship with her 50-year-old teacher because that's just, I'm in love, that's just what I want, and if I can't have that, I don't want to live. What responsible parent or state agency says, we'll affirm you in this? We need to be applying the same adult responsibility for the best interest of our child, not simply what our child subjectively wants. That's what a responsible and loving society does. It doesn't just give young people everything they want. That is state-sponsored or adult-sponsored self-harm.
Mr. and Mrs. John Doe II came to us to join together to say, not here, not now, game over. And they filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland and appealed the sealing of that case to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, and are filing suit in malpractice, as the complaint has set forth, based on non-consent. The lack of consent for these so-called medical interventions is established over 1,000 pages of medical documentation.
If $1 of federal funds was used to attack this family, we have a problem. You can't pick and choose when you have consent. You just cannot do that. So we have to have some kind of rules here, which is what I'm really pushing for. You know, we need to have laws to define what this is, to ensure that no entity in this country, you know, can circumvent consent when that parent has done nothing wrong.
We have parents that call us and ask us what to do about their child that is experiencing sexual confusion, but they can't trust the medical system. They can't trust the mental health system. This is a lament from parents that we're hearing all the time, and it is such a distress call. They feel like they're in almost an impossible situation. They feel alone.
These are not somebody else's children. They're all our children.
First of all, understand that you really are the expert of your child. Trust your parental instincts. Whatever distance you have to go, whatever state you have to go to, find a mental health professional, find an institution that aligns with your value system. Because if you don't, you're going to be potentially in a world of hurt, in a controversial situation, an adversarial situation with an institution of professionals. And unfortunately, they hold a lot of power.
When we have children that are living in more progressive areas where the schools or other professionals, mental health professionals included, are affirming secretively, then as soon as that child is saying that they are feeling suicidal or that their parents are going to abuse them in some other form, then the children are going to be at risk of coming into care because they're going to call the authorities to remove the child.
When it's welfare of a child involved, some parents actually beat their children and do abuse them. So there is a framework for a child to legally be removed. In the case of this gender ideology policy, the notion that you're actually proven not guilty, as with Mr. and Mrs. John Doe II, becomes a Pyrrhic victory, because the new approach in Child Protective Services Court in states like Indiana and Maryland is that a parent may be deemed fit and may be found not to have abused the child, and yet those parents are denied custody. Why? Because the courts say, nevertheless, despite the fitness of these parents and the non-abuse finding, the best interests of the child are to be outside the care of those parents.
Every American should have the right to raise their child, in a safe, loving environment. And no stranger, no physician, no doctor, no judge, no police officer, no politician should walk into a family and break that family up because I disagree with the way you conduct your life. It's horrible. It smells of abuse of power. The John Does are simple Americans. They're just regular Americans. They're veterans of the Air Force. They're African Americans. They're not Republican. They're not. They're just regular people who have no political will in this issue. Just want their child back, and it's a shame. I don't think they will get their child back anytime soon.
Mr. John Doe II and Mrs. John Doe lead their family, and they lead in prayer. Mr. and Mrs. John Doe II are praying for the reuniting of this family. The trauma of losing a child whom you have reared, who has been accomplished as a Bible Bee champion, as a 15-year-old studying engineering in college, who has 2 younger sons looking up to him, who also are denied a brother. The trauma of not just having a child gone, but having the apparatus of the state, an accusatory attorney prosecuting you for loving and leading your child and family to safety and security. I have told Mr. and Mrs. John Doe II, who have authorized me to make this disclosure, I don't see how they remain as collected as they are. But they do have faith in our legal processes, that through them, crooked ways might be made straight. That's the hope amid the trauma. They understand that if this costly child snatching, sex changing, and sex trafficking can befall them, with their considerable prayer life, ability to have 3 attorneys, capacities in terms of their social and religious networks, and they are facing lawfare, which is warfare, to which this family is accustomed and can fight back and win. What about the poor families who don't have that social net, who don't have that village? These families are being rolled into submission. We believe that court cases are being covered up under seal nationwide, and the remainder of the Doe's life is to be devoted to rescuing these families the way another great Marylander, Harriet Tubman, went back down into the oppressive environment and pulled people out through self-help and faith into liberation. That's how the Does see themselves. And when this story is written in the final analysis, it's going to be a story of victory and redemption, because the American legal order, the constitutional order, we the people will not tolerate this. Time is up, and thank goodness the whole world is watching. The Doe family is proud and buoyed to be on the forefront of that correction.
My daughter's 18 now, but at 12 years old, she said that she was trans. From day one, when I went into court asking for the return of my child to my custody, they said no.
Would your parent ever purposefully hurt you? No. If your parent knew that you were hurting, would they want to help you feel better? Yes.
So this is causing young people trauma, but there's also a second trauma, and that's the trauma of breaking up the family.
I understand now that this has happened to thousands of parents, but at the time I felt really alone.